Gideon Blackwell raised his crystal glass and called me trash with a smile that cost more than my first car. The table froze, waiting for me to beg for his approval. They didn't realize that while he was busy trying to humiliate me, his company was already standing on a trapdoor that I controlled. By Monday morning, the man who tried to erase me would be signing his own resignation. My name is Alexandra Walker. I am 36 years old. I built a company from scratch, turning nothing into a valuation that terrifies Wall Street banks. I've negotiated with sharks in Hong Kong and faced down regulators in Brussels. I don't rattle easily. I don't sweat when the temperature rises. But as I sat at the massive mahogany table in the center of the Blackwell estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, I felt a sharp, cold realization that I wasn't a guest. I was a specimen. The estate was less of a home and more of a fortress disguised as a country mansion. It sat behind 12-foot wrought iron gates and a driveway that stretched for nearly a quarter of a mile, lined with ancient oak trees that seemed to judge the price of your vehicle as you passed. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and that specific metallic scent of inherited wealth. It was a smell that said comfort was irrelevant, and legacy was everything. I sat to the right of my fiancé, Owen Blackwell. Owen was 34. Handsome in that way people who have never had to worry about student loans or mortgage payments are handsome. His skin was clear. His posture was trained, and his smile was easy. But tonight, that smile was tight at the corners. His hand, resting on the white linen tablecloth, trembled slightly. He was terrified. He was the heir apparent to the Blackwell Dominion Group, a massive conglomerate that was currently hemorrhaging money. Though no one at this table would dare mention the deficit to them, the Blackwell name was as immutable as gravity. The dining room was cavernous. A crystal chandelier the size of a Honda Civic hung above us, casting a fractured, shimmering light over the 20 guests. These were friends, donors, senators, and power brokers. They were people who measured human worth by bloodlines. I was the anomaly. I was the woman without a last name that mattered in their registry. I was the self-made tech founder wearing a dress I bought with my own money, not an allowance from a trust fund. Gideon Blackwell sat at the head of the table. He was a man who took up space even when he was perfectly still. He was 68, with silver hair slicked back, revealing a forehead that showed no worry, only judgment. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like armor. During the first 2 courses, he barely looked at me. He spoke to the senator on his left about tax loopholes and to the heiress on his right about her equestrian horses. I was invisible, or so I thought. The soup plates had been cleared. The staff, moving like ghosts in silent shoes, poured a vintage red wine that probably cost $15,000 a bottle. I took a sip. It tasted like metal and earth. Owen leaned close to me. His voice was a barely audible whisper above the hum of polite conversation. "You're doing great," he said. I looked at him. His eyes were pleading. He needed me to be doing great. Because if I failed, he failed. He wanted to marry me, but he needed his father's permission to breathe. I squeezed his hand under the table, feeling the clamminess of his palm. "It's just a dinner, Owen," I said softly. "With him, it's never just a dinner," Owen replied. He was right. Gideon tapped his spoon against his crystal glass. The sound was sharp, a singular note that cut through the low murmur of the room. Silence fell instantly. It wasn't a respectful silence. It was a fearful one. The guests turned to the head of the table, their faces arranging themselves into masks of polite anticipation. Gideon stood up. He held his wineglass by the stem, swirling the dark liquid. He looked around the table, making eye contact with the senator, the heiress, the investment banker. Finally, his eyes landed on Owen. He smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. It was a shark's smile. "Tonight is a celebration of standards," Gideon began. His voice was a rich baritone, cultivated in the best New England boarding schools. "We live in a world that is rapidly losing its appreciation for quality. We see it in our architecture, our politics, and our businesses. Everyone wants a shortcut. Everyone believes they deserve a seat at the table simply because they exist. A few guests nodded in agreement. They loved being told they were the last guardians of civilization. Gideon took a step away from his chair. He walked slowly along the length of the table. The floorboards didn't dare creak beneath him. "My son, Owen, has always had a big heart," Gideon continued. He stopped behind Owen's chair and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Owen stiffened. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped his napkin. "He sees the best in things." He sees potential where others see waste. It's a noble quality, in small doses. The room was dead silent. I felt a prickle of heat at the back of my neck. I knew with absolute certainty that the predator had found its prey. Gideon removed his hand from Owen's shoulder and took a step toward me. He looked down. I looked up. Meeting his gaze, I refused to blink. I refused to look away. I had faced down boardroom coups and hostile takeovers. I was not going to be intimidated by an old man in a tuxedo. However, his voice dropped to a conversational, almost intimate volume. One must be careful not to confuse charity with equality. We can admire the effort of those who crawl their way out of the gutter. It's quaint. It's amusing. He paused. The air in the room seemed to vanish. "But Owen," Gideon said, turning back to his son while keeping his eyes locked on mine, "you do not bring the experiment into the main house, and you certainly do not marry it. We have staff to take out the trash, not to dine with it." The word hung in the air. Asterisk. Trash. Asterisk. He had said it with such elegance, such casual cruelty, that it took a second for the guests to process it. Then the reaction came. It wasn't a gasp. It was a freeze. The woman across from me, a matriarch dripping in diamonds, stared at me with wide eyes. She wasn't horrified for me. She was fascinated. She looked at me the way one looks at a car crash or a zoo animal that has escaped its enclosure. They were waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for the girl from the foster system to scream and cry, to throw a drink. They were waiting for me to prove Gideon right. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in the center of my chest. It wasn't shame. It was clarity. This was his moment. This was the test. A man who loved a woman would not tolerate this. A man with a spine would flip the table. A man with dignity would stand up and tell his father to go to hell. Owen looked at me. His face was pale. His eyes darted between me and his father. I saw the conflict raging behind his pupils. I saw the fear of being cut off from his inheritance. I saw the terror of the old man's disapproval. Owen placed his hands on the armrests of his chair. He pushed himself up. He rose about 2 inches. My heart hammered against my ribs. Asterisk. "Stand up, asterisk," I commanded him in my mind. Asterisk. "Stand up and walk out with me." Asterisk. Owen looked at Gideon. Gideon simply raised one eyebrow, a micro-expression of absolute dominance. Owen paused, let out a shaky breath, and then lowered himself back into his chair. He looked down at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. The silence that followed was louder than the insult. That delay, that hesitation, that final surrender, hurt more than the word times trash times ever could. Gideon was an enemy. I expected his cruelty. Owen was supposed to be my partner. His silence was a confirmation. I was alone. I was entirely alone in a room full of people who thought I was dirt. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. Inhaled. Exhaled. The storm inside me roared a hurricane of rage and humiliation. But I built a wall of ice around it. I would not give them the satisfaction of a tear. I would not give them the pleasure of a scene. I reached for my napkin, unfolded it from my lap, and placed it carefully on the table next to my plate of roast duck. I smoothed the linen with a steady hand. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh sound that made 2 guests jump. I stood up. I am 5'8", but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. I smoothed the front of my black dress. I looked directly at Gideon Blackwell. He was watching me with smug satisfaction. expecting a tantrum. "Thank you, Gideon," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. It projected clearly to the back of the room. "Thank you for the clarity. Business requires precise data, and you've provided it in abundance tonight." I didn't look at Owen. He didn't exist anymore. He was just another piece of furniture in his father's house. I turned around. The walk to the double doors felt like it took an hour. I kept my chin high. I could feel their eyes on my back, dissecting me, my posture, my walk, my clothes. I passed the silent staff standing against the wall. One of them, a young waitress, looked at me with something resembling pity. I didn't want her pity. I wanted her to see that I wasn't broken. I passed the oil portraits of deceased Blackwell ancestors. They looked down with the same arrogant sneer as Gideon. I walked out of the dining room, crossed the vaulted foyer, and stepped out through the heavy front door. The night air was crisp and sharp, smelling of pine and impending rain. It filled my lungs, clearing out the stench of beeswax and stagnation. I walked down the stone steps to the driveway. The valet, a young man in a red vest, saw me coming. He looked confused. Dinner had barely started. No one left this early. "Miss Walker?" he asked. "My car, please," I said. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" "Just get the car," I said. My tone was sharper than I intended, but I could feel the adrenaline starting to make my hands shake. I clasped them together. He jogged to the key box. A moment later, he brought my car around. It was a black Toyota Camry, practical, reliable, sitting in a driveway full of custom Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Range Rovers. It looked like a mistake. It looked like a staff car. Gideon had called me trash. He thought I was small. He thought I was poor because I didn't flaunt wealth. He didn't know that my holding company had just cleared $200 million in revenue last quarter. He didn't know that I drove a Toyota because I preferred reinvesting my capital rather than wearing it. And he certainly didn't know that his Wall Street bankers had been emailing me for 3 months, begging for a liquidity injection. I got into the driver's seat. The leather was cold. I shut the door, sealing myself inside my own world. The silence of the car was different. It was safe. I put the key in the ignition. The engine purred to life with a soft hum. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the window where I knew Owen was probably still sitting, staring at his plate, drowning in his own cowardice. I shifted into drive. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth ached. As I drove down the long, oak-lined driveway, the anger began to transmute. It stopped being heat and started becoming fuel. They thought it was just a dinner. They thought it was just a little humiliation to put the outsider in her place. Gideon Blackwell had made a fatal mistake. He assumed I was desperate to belong at his table. He didn't realize I was a builder. And when a foundation is rotten, you don't move in. "You condemn the building." I reached the wrought iron gates. They swung open slowly. I turned right onto the main road, accelerating into the darkness. By Monday morning, Gideon wouldn't be worried about who was sitting at his table. He would be worried about whether he still owned the table. I drove through the night, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely free. I drove for 20 minutes in total silence before letting myself turn on the radio. Even then, I kept the volume low, just a hum of static to drown out the echo of Gideon's voice in my head. Asterisk, trash. Asterisk. It was a funny word for him to choose. It implied something disposable, something worthless, something you throw away because it stains your pristine existence. Gideon Blackwell didn't know the history of that word in my life. He didn't know that when I was 7 years old, my entire life fit into 2 black plastic garbage bags. That was the standard luggage for the New York State foster care system. You moved from house to house, from temporary family to temporary family, carrying your clothes and your few toys in bags meant for lawn clippings. I learned very early on that if you didn't want to be treated like trash, you had to become indispensable. You had to be the smartest person in the room, the hardest worker in the building, the one who solved the problems the adults were too tired or too incompetent to fix. I wasn't rescued. There was no kindly billionaire uncle, no lottery ticket, no fairy godmother. There were only scholarships I fought for like a starving dog fighting for a bone. There were nights studying in 2 4-hour diners because the gas in my apartment had been shut off. There were double shifts at a call center while I taught myself to code on a refurbished laptop missing the I key. Gideon saw a woman in a simple black dress and assumed I was a passenger in his son's life. He didn't see the architect. 7 years ago, I founded Aegis Ledger. It's not a company that makes headlines. We don't sell trendy gadgets or social media apps. We build invisible, boring, critical infrastructure. We use artificial intelligence to manage compliance risk for global banking institutions. We are the plumbing of the financial world. When a bank in Wall Street transfers $1 billion to a fund in Singapore, my software ensures they aren't accidentally laundering money for a cartel or violating a federal sanction. It's unglamorous work. It is also incredibly lucrative. I structured Aegis Ledger carefully. I hold the majority stake through a blind trust. My name appears on legal documents, but not on marketing brochures. We have a CEO who likes the spotlight, a man named Marcus, who looks great in a suit and loves giving interviews. I let him have the magazine covers. I let him go to the galas. I stay in the shadows, watching the numbers, refining the algorithms, and protecting my anonymity. In my world, fame is a liability. Fame alerts your competitors. Silence allows you to maneuver. That was the irony that made my hands grip the steering wheel tighter. Gideon Blackwell judged me by the visibility of my wealth. Because I didn't wear diamonds the size of grapes, because I didn't have a Wikipedia page detailing my family tree, he assumed I was destitute. He measured power by how loud it was. I measured power by what it could control. I thought of Owen. We met 2 years ago at a tech summit in Austin, Texas. He was there representing the family company, trying to understand why their legacy systems were failing. I was there headhunting talent. He seemed different back then. He said he admired my grit. He said he loved that I was self-made. He said he was suffocating under the weight of the Blackwell expectations, and that I was the first real thing he'd encountered in a decade. I believed him. I fell in love with the idea that he wanted to escape. I thought my competence was an asset to him. I thought we were a team. But tonight, the illusion shattered. For the Blackwells, a relationship wasn't a partnership. It was a merger and acquisition strategy. You acquired a wife who brought social capital, land, or political connections. You didn't acquire a woman who worked for a living. To Gideon, I was a bad investment. I was brand depreciation. And Owen. Owen wasn't a rebel. He was a hostage who had learned to love his cage. The moment his father applied pressure, Owen folded. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a maternal figure strong enough to carry him, but weak enough to submit to his father. He wanted the best of both worlds, without paying the price for either. I merged onto the highway, the lights of Manhattan glowing in the distance. My mind shifted gears. The hurt was still there. A dull ache in my chest, but the cold, analytical part of my brain was waking up. I began to review the dinner, not the emotions, but the data. I thought about the conversation I overheard during cocktail hour. A Wall Street banker mentioned that the Blackwell Dominion Group was over-leveraged. Whispers of debt covenant breaches. I thought about the house itself. The lawn was immaculate, but the roof on the east wing had a slight sag. The staff were professional, but they were understaffed for a party of that size. The wine was vintage, but the corks were dry, suggesting they were pulling from the back of the cellar, selling off liquid assets to keep up appearances. Gideon was projecting strength, but the foundation was rotting. And then there was the secret only I knew, the secret that would make Gideon choke on his roast duck if he knew. For the past 6 months, the Blackwell Dominion Group had been quietly shopping for a strategic partner. They needed a massive capital injection to upgrade their archaic compliance systems before federal regulators shut them down. They were desperate. They had approached several tech firms, begging for a lifeline. They had approached Aegis Ledger. Gideon didn't know I owned Aegis. He knew Marcus, my frontman CEO. He knew the company's reputation. He had been emailing my team, offering aggressive terms, promising synergy, practically begging for a meeting to discuss a buyout or partnership. He saw Aegis as his lifeboat. He saw it as the only thing that could save his sinking empire. I had been considering it. I reviewed their books under an NDA. Their financials were a disaster. But the core business had potential. I thought about acquiring them, cleaning up the mess, and saving the 3,000 jobs that were at risk. I thought about doing it for Owen, to secure his legacy, to prove I could help the family. I was ready to sign a letter of intent, LOI, on Monday morning. I laughed out loud in the empty car. It was a sharp, humorless sound. Gideon had looked me in the eye and called me trash. He had humiliated the only person on this planet who had the checkbook and the inclination to save him. He had slapped away the hand reaching out to pull him from the edge of the abyss. I reached for my phone, mounted on the dashboard. I tapped the screen to open my voice memos. I needed to record my observations while they were fresh. I treated every social interaction as a data set, and tonight was a goldmine. I spoke clearly into the microphone. Asterisk. Observation 1. The senator didn't seem surprised when Gideon insulted me. He looked bored. This implies Gideon does this often. It's a ritual, a stress test. Asterisk. Asterisk. Observation 2. The woman in the red dress, the one who runs the charity foundation, smirked. She enjoyed it. She sees the Blackwell decline and enjoys the theater of their arrogance. She won't back them when they fall. Asterisk. Asterisk. Observation 3. Owen waited exactly 8 seconds before sitting back down. 8 seconds. That is the duration of his courage. It's not enough to build a life on. Asterisk. Asterisk. Observation 4. Gideon's hands shook when he raised his glass. It was subtle. A tremor in the left hand. Could be age or stress. Given the financial reports I've seen, I'm betting on stress. He's terrified. He's lashing out because he feels the walls closing in. Asterisk. I ended the recording. The data was conclusive. There was no misunderstanding. It wasn't just a bad night. It was who they were. It was the ecosystem they inhabited. I took the exit toward my Tribeca penthouse. It was a modern apartment, paid for in cash, overlooking the city skyline. It was my sanctuary. When I pulled into the underground garage, I didn't park in a corner. I parked in my designated spot right next to the elevator. I rode up to my unit, the silence of the building wrapping around me. I kicked off my heels at the door. I walked straight to my home office. It was a glass and steel room dominated by 3 large monitors. This was my cockpit. It was where I felt comfortable. I woke up my computer. The screens flared to life, bathing the room in a cold blue light. I pulled up the file labeled Times Project Dominion *. It contained everything. The due diligence reports, the debt analysis, the draft of the letter of intent scheduled to be signed in 48 hours. It was a document that promised to inject $50 million into the Blackwell Dominion Group immediately, with another $50 million to follow over 2 years. It was a generous offer. It was debt, euthanasia. I hovered my mouse over the file. I remembered the look on the valet's face, the pity. I remembered the silence of the room. I remembered Owen sitting down. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt efficient. Gideon wanted clarity. I would give him clarity. He wanted to talk about standards. I would show him what happens when you fail to meet mine. I opened my secure email client. I typed a new message to Maya Reed, my chief of staff. It was 1 a.m., but Maya would be awake. She slept as little as I did. Asterisk. Subject. Project Dominion. Immediate action required. Asterisk. I stared at the blinking cursor. The old Alexandra, the one who wanted to be loved, the one who wanted a family, hesitated for a microsecond, but that Alexandra had been left at the dining table in Greenwich. I typed the body of the email. Asterisk. Cancel the meeting with the Blackwell team for Monday. Draft a rescission of the letter of intent. Cite strategic misalignment and leadership volatility. Do not offer a reschedule. And Maya, get me the contact info for Greywatch Capital. I want to know who holds the secondary debt on the Blackwell estate. Asterisk. I hit send. The email vanished from my outbox. Somewhere in the cloud, the gears began to turn. The lifeboat was being pulled away. The sharks were being summoned. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window at the city. The lights were beautiful. They looked like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Real diamonds, the kind you earn. I wasn't trash. I was the owner of the landfill. I was the recycler. I was the one who decided what was kept and what was burned. And Gideon Blackwell was about to find out that when you treat people like trash, eventually, you're the one who gets taken out. My phone started buzzing against the center console before I had even left the perimeter of the Blackwell estate. The screen lit up, illuminating the dark cabin of my sedan with a harsh artificial glow. It was Owen. I let it ring. I watched his name flash on the screen, feeling a detached curiosity. I wondered how many times he would call. I wondered what script he was rehearsing in his head. I wondered if he was calling from the table, whispering into his napkin while his father watched, or if he had retreated to the bathroom like a scolded schoolboy. The ringing stopped. Then it started again immediately. I merged onto the interstate, keeping my eyes on the white lines stretching into the dark. The vibration was persistent. It was a physical intrusion, a desperate scratching at my peace. I tapped the answer button and put it on speaker. I didn't say hello. I wanted to hear how he would start. Alexandra? Alex, are you there? His voice was breathless, sounding thin, stripped of the polished confidence he wore like a costume when we were in public. I'm driving, Owen, I said. My voice was calm. It surprised even me. It sounded like the voice I used when firing an incompetent vendor. I'm so sorry, he blurted out. The words tripped over each other. My God, Alex, I am so sorry. You know he didn't mean it like that. He's been under a lot of pressure lately. The board is breathing down his neck. The refinancing deal is stalled. He had too much wine. It was just a bad joke that landed wrong. I listened to him build a fortress of excuses. He was constructing a reality where his father wasn't a monster, but a victim of circumstance. It was a fascinating architectural feat of denial. A joke? I repeated. He called me trash. Owen. Which part was the punchline? It was a poor choice of words, Owen insisted. I could hear the background noise of the party behind him, the clinking of silverware, the low murmur of laughter. He wasn't in the bathroom. He was in the hallway, probably just outside the dining room doors, still in his father's orbit. He respects you, Alex. He really does. He's he's just old school. He tests people. It's his way. He wanted to see if you could handle the pressure. I handle pressure for a living, Owen. I don't handle abuse. I know. And I'll talk to him, I promise. I'll make him apologize. Just, can you turn around? Please, come back if you leave like this. It looks like he won. It looks like you ran away. Just come back. Eat dessert. Show him you're bigger than this. For me. I gripped the steering wheel. The leather creaked under my fingers. For you, I said, the words tasting like ash. Yes, for us. We can fix this. I love you, Alex. You know I love you. I signaled to change lanes, passing a slow-moving truck. The red taillights blurred in my vision. Owen, I said, I have a question for you. It's a data point. I need clarification. Anything. Ask anything. When he said that, I said slowly, measuring every syllable. When he called me trash in front of 20 people, how long did you wait before defending me? Silence. The background noise on his end seemed to swell. I could hear someone laughing, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. I didn't wait, Owen stammered. I was in shock. Alex, you have to understand. It happened so fast. My brain froze. I was going to say something. You saw me stand up. I saw you stand up halfway, I corrected. And then, I saw you sit back down. I was processing. He's my father. You know how he is. I was trying to calculate the best way to de-escalate the situation without making a scene. No, I said. You weren't processing. You were obeying. That's not fair. It's entirely fair. It's the only truth that matters. I thought back to the moments immediately following the dinner. Just before getting into my car, the outline of that memory was sharp and cutting. I had been standing on the gravel driveway, waiting for the valet to bring my sedan. The night air was biting. I was alone. Or so I thought. Then I heard footsteps on the gravel. I turned to see Senator Marcus Sterling approaching me. Sterling was an influential politician, a man with a smile that had been poll-tested down to the millimeter. He was one of Gideon's oldest friends. He had been sitting 3 chairs down from me, sipping his soup while Gideon dissected my dignity. He stopped a few feet away, swirling a glass of scotch he'd brought outside. "Miss Walker," he had said. His voice was warm, paternal. It was the kind of voice that made you want to trust him, which was exactly why he was dangerous. "Senator," I had replied, keeping my face blank. "Hell of an exit," he said. He took a sip of his drink. Very dramatic. Gideon appreciates a little theater. Keeps the blood pumping. Glad I could entertain. He chuckled softly. "Don't take it personally, my dear. You're a brilliant young woman, clearly ambitious. But you have to understand the ecology of a place like this." He gestured vaguely at the lit-up mansion behind us. "Gideon doesn't just let anyone in. He breaks people first. He needs to see the pieces. He needs to see if they'll glue back together in the shape he wants." He took a step forward, invading my personal space just enough to be uncomfortable. "You have a lot of potential," the senator said. "It would be a shame to waste it fighting a war you can't win. Gideon owns the board. He owns the bank. He owns the town. If you want to be part of the family, you have to learn to bend the knee. It's better for your posture in the long run." It was framed as advice. It was framed as a compliment to my potential. But I knew what it was. It was a warning. It was a notification from the pack that the alpha had bitten, and my role was to bleed quietly. I looked at the senator. I saw the broken capillaries on his nose, the dullness in his eyes. He was a powerful man, but standing in that driveway, he looked like a henchman. "Senator," I had said, "I've never been very good at kneeling. It's bad for the joints." The valet had arrived with my car then. The senator had smiled a tight, dismissive expression and walked back to the house. That interaction crystallized everything for me. It wasn't an isolated incident of an old drunk being rude. It was a system. "Owen," I said into the phone, snapping back to the present. "I realized something tonight. The room wasn't watching us to see if we were a good match. They were watching a submission ritual. Gideon was humiliating me. And he was waiting for you to help him hold me down." "That's insane," Owen said. His voice was getting higher, more desperate. "You're overthinking this. It's just family drama. Every family has it. Not like this," I said. "You told me you were in shock. You said you froze. But you didn't freeze because you were surprised. You froze because you've been trained to fear him more than you love anyone else. You've been conditioned to value his approval above your own self-respect, and tonight you proved the training works perfectly." "I'm leaving," Owen said suddenly. "I'm walking out right now. I'll get an Uber. I'll come to your apartment. We can talk in person. I'll show you. I choose you. Alex, I choose you." I heard the declaration. I wanted to believe it. A part of me, the part that remembered our weekends in Napa Valley and the way he held me when I was exhausted, wanted to believe he could change. But then I heard the hesitation in his voice. I heard the question mark at the end of his sentence. He wasn't telling me he was coming. He was asking for permission to leave. He was asking me to validate his rebellion so that if it went wrong, he could blame me for forcing him into it. He sounded like a child threatening to run away from home, waiting for his mother to tell him to put his coat back on. I didn't. He sounded stunned. "But I want to be with you." "You don't want to be with me, Owen. You want to be comfortable. And right now, being with me is very uncomfortable. Alex, please don't do this. Don't shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm giving you a command, since that's the only language you seem to respond to tonight. Go back inside. What? Go back to the dining room. Sit at the table. Finish your dessert. Listen to your father tell stories about the good old days. Do exactly what he expects you to do. I don't understand why you would want me to do that. Because it's who you are, Owen, I said. My voice dropped an octave, becoming softer, but heavier. And I don't date projects. I don't date renovations. I date men. And until you figure out how to be one without your father's permission, we have nothing to talk about. Alex, wait. I ended the call. The silence that returned to the car was profound. It wasn't empty. It was heavy as a blanket. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. It lit up again almost immediately. Then again. Then again. I reached over and held the power button down until the screen went black. I was alone on the road. The interstate stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt leading away from the toxicity of Greenwich and back to the reality I had built for myself. I could feel tears pricking the corners of my eyes. The biological response to betrayal was trying to assert itself. My body wanted to grieve. It wanted to mourn the 2 years I had invested in a man who turned out to be hollow. It wanted to scream at the injustice of being treated like an interloper in a world I could buy and sell. But I didn't cry. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I forced my breathing to slow. Asterisk, inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale for 4 seconds. Asterisk. Crying was a release of energy, an admission of hurt. And while I was hurt, I couldn't afford to waste energy. I needed that energy. I needed it to fuel the engine that was revving in the back of my mind. I started planning. The road ahead blurred, replaced by a mental spreadsheet. I saw the organizational chart of the Blackwell Dominion Group. I saw the debt maturity dates. I saw the covenants that gave creditors the right to seize assets if the liquidity ratio fell below a certain point. I saw the vulnerabilities. Gideon Blackwell thought he had dismissed me. He thought he had sent the little girl home to cry into her pillow. He didn't know he had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. The senator in the driveway had warned me that Gideon broke people. He was right. Gideon did break people. But he had made a critical error in judgment. He assumed I was glass. I wasn't glass. I was steel. And when you strike steel, you don't break it. You forge it. You make it harder. You make it sharper. I checked the time on the dashboard. It was 11:45 p.m. By the time the sun came up, I would have a battle plan. By the time Gideon woke up with his hangover and his ego, I would already be moving his chess pieces. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. The engine roared, a deep, powerful sound that vibrated through the chassis. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going home to work. The submission ritual was over. The war had just begun. The digital clock on my dash read 12:14 a.m. when my phone lit up again. I had just merged back onto the highway, leaving the quiet back roads for the steady hum of the interstate leading to New York City. The vibration of the phone against the passenger seat was different this time. It wasn't the frantic, emotional buzzing of Owen trying to salvage a relationship he'd already surrendered. It was a sustained, demanding rhythm. I glanced at the screen. The name displayed was Maya Reed. My chief of staff did not call after midnight to ask how my evening went. She didn't call to chat about the weather. Maya operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. If she was calling me at this hour, it meant the building was on fire, or someone had just tried to buy the building. I tapped the steering wheel controls to answer. "Talk to me, Maya," I said. My voice was stripped of earlier emotion. I had compartmentalized the hurt, locking it in a box labeled later. Right now, I was the CEO of Aegis Ledger. "Alexandra, I'm sorry to bother you," Maya said. Her voice was crisp, alert, and tinged with a tension I rarely heard from her. She was in her home office. I could hear the rapid clack of her mechanical keyboard in the background. "We have a situation with the Blackwell account." "What kind of situation?" "I just received a secure communication from their legal counsel," Maya said. "They are pushing for an accelerated timeline. They want to move the signing of the letter of intent to 8 a.m. this coming Monday. I frowned, keeping my eyes on the taillights of a semi-truck ahead. Monday? That's in 36 hours. The original timeline was 2 weeks. We haven't even finished the final liability audit. I told them that. Maya replied. I said it was impossible. I said our risk assessment team needs at least 10 more days to untangle the debt structures of their subsidiaries. They didn't care. They said the deadline is non-negotiable. They said if we don't sign by Monday morning, they're opening the floor to other bidders. I signaled and pulled the car over onto the shoulder of the highway. The gravel crunched loudly under my tires as I came to a stop under the harsh yellow glare of a street lamp. I needed to focus. I needed to read the silence between the words. Who sent the request, Maya? I asked. Was it General Counsel? The CFO? That's the weird part. Maya said. The typing in the background stopped. The email came from legal, but the directive was attached as a forwarded memo. It came directly from Gideon Blackwell's personal server. He bypassed his own negotiating team to order this. I stared through the windshield at the empty road. Gideon. The pieces of the puzzle locked together with a deafening click. Tonight, at dinner, Gideon had been theatrical. He had been cruel. He had treated me like a beggar at his gates. He practically dared me to walk away. And yet, 3 hours later, he was personally intervening to force me to hand him $50 million by Monday morning. It was a contradiction unless you understood how bullies operated. Gideon wasn't projecting strength. He was terrified. He humiliated me at dinner to establish dominance. He wanted me to feel small, lucky to be associated with him, so that when he demanded the money on Monday, I would sign without asking questions. He was trying to rush the closing because he knew something I didn't know. He knew his time was up. The debt. The rumors I'd heard were true, but they were worse than rumors. He wasn't just over-leveraged. He was insolvent. He needed my capital to make a payment next week. If he missed that payment, the banks would seize the company. He was drowning. And he had spent the evening spitting in the face of the only lifeguard on the beach. He's desperate, I said softly. Pardon? Maya asked. Gideon, I said. He's trying to strong-arm us because he has no other options. There are no other bidders. Maya, if there were, he would have taken their money months ago because they wouldn't have demanded the compliance overhaul we're demanding. We are his last resort. So, what's the play? Maya asked. Do we push back? Agree to Monday but demand a lower valuation if he's that desperate? We can probably shave 10% off the acquisition price. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. I remembered the way Gideon smiled when he called me trash. I remembered the silence of the room. I remembered Owen looking down at his plate. This wasn't about saving a legacy company anymore. It wasn't about profit margins or synergy. No, I said. We don't negotiate. Okay. Maya said slowly. So we stick to the original timeline. No, I said. We cancel it. There was a pause on the line. I could hear Maya's breath catch. Cancel the deal? She repeated. Alexandra, we've spent 4 months on this. We have legal fees, due diligence costs. The board is expecting this acquisition to expand our market share. If we walk away now, the sunk cost is nearly $1 million. I don't care about the sunk cost, I said. My voice was cold, razor sharp. Draft a notice of rescission, effective immediately. Withdraw the offer. Kill the term sheet. Tell our lawyers to pull access to all communication with Blackwell Dominion. I need a cause, Maya said, slipping into execution mode even if she disagreed. If we rescind without cause, there could be a kill fee depending on how the preliminary agreement was drafted. We need a defensible reason to withdraw. I'll give you a reason, I said. Write this down. I'm ready. Asterisk. Toxic leadership and incompatible corporate values. Asterisk. Alexandra, Maya warned. That's aggressive. That's not standard corporate language. Usually we say strategic misalignment or market conditions. If you put toxic leadership in a formal legal notice, It's a declaration of war. Gideon will explode. Let him explode, I said. I want him to read it. I want him to know exactly why his lifeboat was cut. I want him to know that the trash he insulted at dinner is the same trash refusing to underwrite his bailout. Send it to his personal email, Maya. Copy his board of directors. Copy his general counsel. Make sure everyone sees it. Understood, Maya said. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the professional weariness. I'll draft it now. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. Don't hang up yet. I have one more instruction. I looked at the dashboard clock again. 12:20 a.m. The night was still young. I need you to schedule a meeting, I said. For tomorrow, or I guess today. Sunday morning, as early as possible. With who? Maya asked. The Blackwell team is going to be in an uproar the second I send this notice. They'll be calling us every 5 minutes. Not with the Blackwells, I said. I want a meeting with Greywatch Capital. Silence. This time the silence was longer. Greywatch Capital was not a tech firm. It was not a bank. It was a distressed debt fund. In the polite world of high finance, they were referred to as special situations investors. In the real world, they were vultures. They bought the debt of dying companies for pennies on the dollar, seized the assets, stripped the business for parts, and sold the scraps. They were the executioners of the corporate world. Greywatch? Maya asked, her voice dropping a register. Alexandra. Greywatch holds the secondary notes on the Blackwell debt. I saw that in the diligence files. They are the ones circling the carcass. Exactly, I said. Why do you want to talk to them? Maya asked. If we're walking away, why do we care who eats the Blackwells? Because I'm not walking away, Maya, I said. I'm just changing my point of entry. I stared out at the dark highway, visualizing the battlefield map. Gideon thought he owned the castle. He thought he could lock me out, but he forgot he didn't own the land the castle sat on. The bank owned it. And the bank was looking to sell the mortgage to the highest bidder. Gideon thinks he can dictate terms to me because he thinks I want to be his partner, I told Maya. He thinks I need his permission to enter his world. He's wrong. I don't want to be his partner anymore. Partners have to be polite. Partners have to compromise. I am done compromising. You're going to buy the debt? Maya whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. I'm going to buy the debt, I confirmed. I am going to buy the paper Gideon Blackwell signed when he mortgaged his ego. If I can't buy his cooperation, I will buy the floor out from under him. I want to own the trapdoor, Maya. That's hostile, Maya said. That is extremely hostile. If we buy that debt position from Greywatch, we effectively become Gideon's landlord. We can call the loan. We can force a default. We can seize the company without his permission. Yes, I said. We can. It'll cost a premium, Maya noted, her brain already running the numbers. Greywatch knows what they have. They'll want a markup. Offer them 10% above face value, I said. Tell them we can close in 48 hours, all cash. Greywatch wants a quick exit. They don't want to manage a failing conglomerate. We are the perfect buyers. We have the liquidity. And we have the tech to actually fix the underlying business once we take control. Okay, Maya said. I could hear the thrill creeping into her voice now. The shock had passed, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. Maya was a shark in her own right. She just swam in deeper waters. I'll reach out to the managing director at Greywatch. I have a contact there. I'll get it scheduled. But Alexandra, are you sure? Once we do this, there is no going back. This destroys any chance of an amicable relationship with the Blackwell family. This destroys Owen's inheritance. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. I saw Owen's face. I saw the weakness in his jawline. I saw the way he had looked at his father with terrified reverence. Owen's inheritance was already gone. It had been spent on bad investments and vintage wine. I wasn't destroying it. I was just turning on the lights so they could see the empty vault. There is no relationship to save, I said. Send the rescission notice, Maya. Send it now. And get me that meeting with Graywatch. On it, Maya said. Get some sleep, boss. Monday is going to be a bloodbath. No, I said. Monday is going to be a business day. Good night, Maya. I disconnected the call. I sat in the silence of the car for another minute. My heart was beating with a slow, steady rhythm. The adrenaline of the dinner had faded, replaced by the cold, hard focus of execution. I put the car back in drive and pulled onto the highway. Gideon Blackwell wanted a fight. He wanted to play games with hierarchy and status. He wanted to use his position to make me feel powerless. He had made the classic mistake of the old guard. He assumed that because he sat at the head of the table, he controlled the meal. He didn't understand that the person who controls the meal isn't the one eating it. It's the one who bought the restaurant. I drove toward the city, leaving the Connecticut countryside behind. The Manhattan skyline rose before me, a glow of amber and white against the night sky. Somewhere in that city, in a skyscraper office, a server was processing my email. Somewhere in Greenwich, a notification was pinging on Gideon Blackwell's phone. He probably wouldn't check it until morning. He would sleep soundly, thinking he had put me in my place. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn all night. Let him sleep. He was going to need his rest. Monday morning arrived with the glare of a camera flash. The sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Aegis Ledger headquarters in downtown Manhattan, illuminating the open-plan workspace. The office was a hive of quiet, high-frequency intelligence. Engineers with noise-canceling headphones typed in rhythm with the market. Analysts clustered around holographic data screens. The air smelled of espresso and ambition. It was a clean, transparent world. It was the exact opposite of the Blackwell estate. I was in my private office, watching the security feed on my monitor. Gideon Blackwell had arrived. He didn't enter. He invaded. He pushed through the revolving glass doors like a monarch accustomed to doors opening before he even reached them. He wore a navy pinstripe suit that probably cost more than my freshman year of college, and his face was a mask of furious indignation. He ignored the reception desk, brushing past the young woman who tried to greet him, and marched toward the elevators. My head of security, a man named Jonas, who used to be FBI, intercepted him. On the silent screen, I saw Gideon pointing a finger in Jonas's face. I could imagine the volume. I could imagine the demands. He was looking for the owner. He was looking for the person who dared send him a rescission notice at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. He was looking for a man. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Jonas, I said calmly. Don't remove him. Escort Mr. Blackwell to Conference Room Alpha, the glass one in the center of the trading floor. Copy that, Jonas replied. I watched as Jonas gestured firmly. Gideon hesitated, straightened his jacket, and then followed. He thought he was being led to the executive suite to accept an apology. He didn't realize he was being put in a display case. Conference Room Alpha was a masterpiece of intimidation disguised as transparency. It was a pure glass box located right in the middle of our busiest floor. It was soundproof, but it was visually exposed from every angle. When you were inside, you were the fish, and the whole company was the ocean around you. Jonas opened the door, and Gideon stepped in. He began pacing immediately. He pulled out his phone, checked it, shoved it back in his pocket, and then glared at the employees walking past outside. They looked at him with mild curiosity, the angry old man in the expensive suit, and then went back to work. I let him wait. I sat at my desk and reviewed the file one last time. I checked the latest report from Graywatch Capital. The acquisition of the debt position was in the final stages of approval. I checked the cash flow analysis of Blackwell Dominion. I memorized the numbers until they weren't just data points, but weapons. 10 minutes passed on the screen. Gideon was losing his composure. He slammed his hand on the conference table. He was yelling into the void. He was sweating. It was time. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and picked up a single, thin leather folder. I didn't bring a lawyer. I didn't bring Maya. I walked out of my office and took the long way through the trading floor. I walked with a steady, rhythmic pace, I saw heads turn as I passed. My employees knew something was happening, but they knew better than to ask. I was the calm center of the storm. I reached the glass door of Conference Room Alpha. Gideon had his back to me, staring out at the city skyline. His hands were clasped behind his back in a pose of rigid tension. I swiped my access card. The lock clicked with a sharp mechanical sound. Gideon spun around. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped. The tension left his body, replaced by a wave of dismissive irritation. He rolled his eyes. It was a visceral reaction. He saw Alexandra Walker, the girlfriend, the charity case, the trash from dinner. "Alexandra," he said. His voice had been muffled by the soundproofing until the door sealed shut behind me. Then, the room became a vacuum of silence, amplifying his condescension. "What the hell are you doing here? Did Owen send you? I don't have time for family therapy right now. I'm waiting for the CEO of this company. I'm waiting for Marcus, or whoever runs this place." I didn't answer immediately. I walked past him, the heels of my shoes clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. I walked to the head of the long white conference table. This was the seat of power. It was the seat he was used to occupying. I pulled the chair out and sat down. I placed the leather folder on the table in front of me. I aligned it perfectly with the edge of the desk. Then I looked up and met his eyes. "Take a seat, Gideon," I said. He laughed. It was a bark of disbelief. "Excuse me? I am not sitting down until I speak to the owner of Aegis Ledger. I received an incredibly disrespectful email from this firm yesterday, and I intend to have someone fired for it. Now be a good girl and go find someone who matters. Go find me the man in charge." "You wanted the owner?" I said. My voice was low, level, and absolutely devoid of warmth. "You're looking at her." The silence that followed was different from the silence at dinner. The silence at dinner had been social. It was the silence of people holding their breath. This silence was structural. It was the sound of a worldview collapsing. Gideon stared at me. He blinked. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. "I don't understand," he said. "I built this," I corrected. "I founded Aegis Ledger 7 years ago. I hold 51% of the voting shares through a blind trust. Marcus works for me. The legal team works for me. And the person who authorized the rescission of your letter of intent was me." I watched the realization hit him in waves. First came the confusion. He looked around the room at the glass walls, at the busy employees outside trying to reconcile the scale of this operation with the woman he had dismissed as a nobody. Then came the disbelief. He shook his head. "No, that's impossible. Owen would have told me. You came from nothing. You drive a Toyota. It's an efficient car," I said. "And Owen didn't tell you because Owen didn't know. I keep my business private. Unlike you, I don't need my net worth printed on my forehead to feel important." Then came the fear. It was subtle, but I saw it. His eyes darted to the folder on the table. He realized that the woman he had humiliated was the same woman holding the $50 million check he needed to survive the month. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a sallow, waxy color. Finally came the calculation. Gideon was a predator, and predators adapt. He forced a smile onto his face. It was a ghastly expression, stretching the skin over his teeth. He pulled out the chair opposite mine and sat down, trying to claw back some semblance of authority. "Well," he said, letting out a forced chuckle. Well, this is quite a surprise, Alexandra. I must admit, I underestimated you. You are full of surprises." "I am full of data," I said. "Get to the point of why you're here." He leaned forward, adopting a tone of conspiratorial intimacy. "The point is that we are family, my dear. Or we are about to be. This changes everything, doesn't it? If I had known you were a player of this caliber, the conversation on Saturday would have been very different. I was testing you. Surely you understand that iron sharpens iron. You passed. Look at you. You're a titan. This is wonderful. We can keep this in the house." A merger between Blackwell, Dominion, and Aegis Ledger. Wall Street will love it. We can structure it as a partnership of equals. I'll even put you on the board. Think about it. A seat on the Blackwell board. It's a very exclusive table. He was trying to bribe me with a seat at the table where he had just forbidden me to eat. The arrogance was breathtaking. I don't want a seat on your board, I said. And there will be no merger. The deal is dead, Gideon. I killed it. His smile faltered. Now, Alexandra, let's not be emotional. Business is business. You have a fiduciary duty to your share. Blackwell Dominion is a legacy brand. We have assets. We have history. You have debt, I said. I opened the folder. I reviewed your financials, Gideon. Not the ones you show the public, the real ones. I looked at the spreadsheet. You have 18 days of cash left, I said. 18 days before you miss payroll for 3,000 employees. Gideon stiffened. That is a pessimistic projection. It's an arithmetic fact, I countered. You are in breach of your covenants with 3 separate lenders. Your debt-to-equity ratio is such that it triggers an automatic recall clause if you don't inject $40 million by the end of the month. You are hiding losses in a Cayman Islands subsidiary called Blue Horizon Ventures. But you forgot that my software was designed to find hidden risk. I see everything, Gideon. I see the rot. Gideon's face turned a dark red. You have no right to speak to me like this. I am Gideon Blackwell. I have been a captain of industry since you were in diapers. And now you're the captain of a sinking ship, I said. You came here today thinking you could bully a tech CEO into signing a check. You thought you could use your name and your bluster to get what you want, but you forgot one variable. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table and lacing my fingers together. You forgot that the world has changed. Your name isn't currency here. Your legacy isn't collateral in this room, in this building. The only thing that matters is leverage, and you don't have any. He stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. I'll go to your competitors, he snarled. I'll go to Greywatch. I'll go to the private equity vultures. They'll strip me down, but they'll pay me, and I'll use that money to bury you. I'll tell everyone you're a vindictive girl who used confidential information to settle a personal score. I'll sue you for negotiating in bad faith. Greywatch won't buy you, I said calmly. He stopped. What do you mean? I mean, Greywatch is a distressed debt fund, I said. They are interested in your debt. And as of this morning, they are in exclusive negotiations to sell that debt position. Gideon froze. He understood the implication immediately. If someone else bought his debt, they became his master. To who? He whispered. Who is buying the paper? I didn't answer directly. I didn't need to. The answer was sitting in the chair, at the head of the table. You have a choice, Gideon, I said. You can walk out of this office with your dignity intact, or you can stay and listen to security drag you out. But never come back here demanding to see the owner. I stood up and closed the folder. You insulted me at dinner, Gideon, I said, delivering the words with the precision of a scalpel cut. You thought I was something you could throw away. You thought I was beneath you, but the world is a circle. You insulted me at dinner. Now you will negotiate with me at work. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. Get out of my building, I said. I walked out of the glass room, leaving him alone in the aquarium. I saw the employees outside looking at him. They saw a man with a red face, shaking, and utterly defeated. I walked back to my office. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the cold, hard rhythm of victory. I sat at my desk and pressed the intercom. Jonas, I said. Mr. Blackwell is leaving. Make sure he finds the exit. I watched the screen. I saw Gideon straighten his tie. I saw him try to regain his posture. He walked out of the conference room, but he didn't storm this time. He walked slowly, like a man carrying an enormous weight. He walked past the young analysts and programmers. He walked past the future that was leaving him behind. I turned off the monitor. Phase 1 was complete. He knew who I was. Now, I had to show him what I was capable of. The attack didn't come in the form of a lawsuit or a screaming match in the boardroom. It came as a whisper that turned into a scream across the internet. By Tuesday morning, the narrative had shifted. I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. My name was trending, but not for my software or my acquisition bids. I was trending because someone had painted a target on my back. A popular elite gossip blog, the kind that pretended to be social commentary but was just a sewer for the rich to dispose of their enemies, had dropped an exclusive story. The headline was designed to draw blood. Asterisk, the billion-dollar trap, how a nobody from foster care seduced the Blackwell heir. Asterisk. I sat at my kitchen island, drinking black coffee, reading words that were meant to destroy me. The article was vicious. It painted me as a manipulative social climber who had researched Owen Blackwell's vulnerabilities and targeted him for his inheritance. It claimed I was drowning in personal debt, a lie, and that my company was a shell game built on smoke, but the lies didn't bother me. Lies were easy to disprove. What turned my stomach was the truth. The article contained details that were impossible for an outsider to know. It mentioned the specific date of our first date in Austin. It mentioned an inside joke Owen and I had about his fear of flying. It mentioned the exact timeline of when we moved in together. These weren't public facts. They were the intimate crumbs of a relationship, swept up and fed to the wolves. There was only one source for that information. I called Owen. He answered on the first ring, which meant he was awake and panicking. I didn't do it, he said immediately. Alex, I swear to God I didn't talk to them. I never. Stop, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. Don't lie to me, Owen. The article mentions the turbulence protocol. That's what you call holding my hand during takeoff. Nobody knows that phrase but you and me. Did you sell the story? Or did you just give it away for free? I didn't. His voice cracked. I didn't talk to any reporters. I didn't talk to anyone. Except... He trailed off. The silence on the line was heavy with realization. Except who? I pressed. My mother, he whispered. I closed my eyes. Lenora Blackwell. The quiet woman who had sat next to Gideon at dinner, picking at her salad while her husband eviscerated me. Explain, I commanded. She called me on Sunday, Owen stammered. She was crying. She said Dad was spiraling out of control and that the family's reputation was in danger. She said they needed to prep a PR strategy to protect us, to protect you and me from the fallout of the dinner. She asked for a timeline of our relationship. She said she needed to show the public we were a real couple, not just a fling. She said it was a family PR buffer. I thought she was helping us. You handed over the ammunition, I said. And she handed it to Gideon, who loaded the gun. I didn't know, Owen pleaded. Alex, I thought. That's your problem, Owen. I cut him off. You're 34 years old, and you still think your parents are trying to protect you. They aren't protecting you. They're using you. I hung up. The betrayal clarified everything. The dinner on Saturday night wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was an opening gambit. Gideon had insulted me publicly to lower my value. He wanted to break my confidence. Then he planned to drop these stories to paint me as a gold digger. The goal was simple. Force me into a defensive position. Make me desperate to prove I wasn't trash. Then, when I was weak and humiliated, they would present the solution, a draconian prenuptial agreement, and a business merger, where I would hand over control of my company to prove my loyalty. They wanted to absorb Aegis Ledger into Blackwell Dominion for pennies, using my own relationship as leverage. It was diabolical. And it might have worked, if I were the person they thought I was. I drove to the office with a cold fury burning in my chest. I didn't go through the main lobby this time. I used the private freight elevator. I didn't want to see the pity in my employees' eyes. Maya was waiting for me in my office. She looked tired. Her eyes were red, but her posture was rigid. She held a tablet like a shield. Ignore the blogs, Maya said, before I even sat down. We can file a defamation suit later. Right now, we have something bigger. Bigger than my reputation being shredded? Much bigger, Maya said. I found the ghost. I sat down and gestured for her to continue. The ghost? The missing money? Maya placed the tablet on my desk. It displayed a complex web of financial transactions. You were right about the Cayman Islands subsidiary, but it goes deeper. Gideon isn't just hiding losses. He is reclassifying operational expenses as capital investments to artificially inflate EBITDA. He's taking money meant for infrastructure maintenance money to keep servers running and buildings safe and siphoning it into executive bonuses and consulting fees paid to shell companies he controls. I scanned the data. It was beautiful in a horrifying way. It was a classic creative reclassification scheme. It was fraud. It was the kind of thing that sent CEOs to federal prison. He's looting the ship before it sinks, I said. Exactly, Maya said. If we leak this to the press, he's finished. The stock will go to zero by noon. I looked at the numbers. It was tempting. It would be the ultimate revenge, an anonymous email to Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Gideon Blackwell would be in handcuffs in a week. But revenge is messy. And I didn't just want to destroy Gideon. I wanted to save the company. If I blew up the company now, there would be nothing left to buy. The 3,000 employees would lose their jobs. The assets would be frozen by the DOJ for years. No leaks, I said. Maya looked surprised. Alexandra, he is destroying you in the press. He just called you a con artist in everything but name. You want to show mercy? I don't want mercy, I said. I want the estate. If we leak this illegally, we spook the creditors. The company collapses. We lose the asset. We are going to do this the right way. We are going to file a formal disclosure package with the SEC and a private advisory notice to the primary debt holders. The legal route. Maya nodded slowly. It's slower. It's deadlier, I corrected. A leak is gossip. A formal disclosure is a legal death sentence. Prepare the package, Maya. But don't send it yet. Wait until 3 p.m. this afternoon. That's 1 hour before the market closes. I want the panic to set in right before the closing bell. That way, he has to stew in it all night without being able to trade. Maya smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. 3 p.m. You got it. Just then, my personal email pinged. I opened it. It was from Gideon Blackwell. Asterisk. Subject. A fresh start. Asterisk. Asterisk Alexandra. The media can be so cruel. I was distressed to see the story circulating this morning. We both know how the press likes to twist things. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. I am willing to overlook the misunderstanding in your office if you are willing to be reasonable. Come back to the table. Sign the original deal structure. As a gesture of good faith, I will personally issue a statement welcoming you to the family properly. We can make all this ugliness go away. Let's not let ego get in the way of a lucrative marriage. Asterisk. I stared at the screen. He was offering me a lifeline that was actually a hangman's noose. He thought the bad press had broken me. He thought I would be grateful for his protection. He was offering to make the rumors stop if I submitted to him. I didn't reply. I dragged the email into a folder labeled Times Evidence Asterisk. My phone vibrated again. A text message. I expected it to be Owen begging for forgiveness or Gideon following up on his threat, but the number was unknown. Asterisk, meet me in Central Park. The bench near the conservatory water. 12:30 p.m. Come alone. No lawyers, no family. LB. Asterisk. Lenora Blackwell. I stared at the message. It could be a trap. It could be another ambush. Maybe she wanted to record me losing my temper. Maybe she wanted to deliver another insult in person. But my gut told me something else. I remembered the way she had looked at dinner, not angry, just tired. I remembered Owen saying she was crying when she asked for the timeline. Maya, I said, standing up. Keep the package ready. With who? An unexpected ally, I said. Or a new enemy. I'm not sure which yet. Central Park was quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. The conservatory water was a circle of stillness, surrounded by ancient trees. Lenora Blackwell was sitting on a stone bench, wearing a trench coat and oversized sunglasses, looking like a spy in a bad movie. She didn't look like the queen of Greenwich society. She looked small. I approached her slowly. I didn't sit down. I stood a few feet away, keeping my distance. "You handed over the timeline," I said. I didn't bother greeting her. Lenora took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were swollen. She had been crying, but her gaze was steady. "I did," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "He told me he needed it to write a press release to celebrate your engagement. He said he wanted to fix what happened at dinner." I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to believe him, because it was easier than admitting my husband is a sociopath. "You served me to the wolves, Lenora." "I know," she said. "And I'm sorry. But I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness. I'm here to give you something." She fumbled in her purse. I stiffened, half expecting a subpoena. She pulled out a flash drive. It was a simple, silver, USB drive. She placed it on the stone bench between us. "What is that?" I asked. "Gideon thinks he runs the company," Lenora said. "But I was the one who set up the original HR systems 20 years ago. I was the one who hired the compliance officers. He made me retire. He turned me into a hostess. But I kept my administrative access." She looked at the flash drive. "That drive contains the internal email chains from the last 6 months," she said. "It proves Gideon explicitly ordered the suppression of the risk reports. It proves he threatened to fire the CFO if he didn't falsify the quarterly projections. It proves the creative reclassification wasn't an accident. It was a directive." I stared at the small silver object. This wasn't just evidence of negligence. It was evidence of intent. It was the difference between bankruptcy and prison. "Why, Lenora?" I asked. "Why give this to me? This will destroy him. He's your husband." Lenora looked up at me. For the first time, I saw the steel beneath the silk. "Because there are 3,000 people who work for that company," she said. "People who have mortgages and children. People who didn't marry into this mess. If Gideon stays in charge for another month, the company breaks, and they lose everything. Their pensions are tied to the stock." She took a deep breath. "I've spent 30 years being a decoration," Lenora said. "I sat at that table and watched him diminish you. I watched him diminish our son. I watched him treat people like furniture. I am tired of being a fixture. Alexandra, I can't save the company. I don't have the head for it. But you do." She stood up and smoothed her coat. "Gideon cares about the name on the building," Lenora said. "I care about the people inside it. Destroy him, Alexandra. Take the company. But promise me one thing." "What?" I asked. "Promise me you won't let the employees drown." I looked at her. I saw a woman who had been trapped in a gilded cage for decades, who had finally found the courage to pick the lock. I picked up the flash drive. It felt heavy in my hand. "I promise," I said. Lenora nodded. She put her sunglasses back on. "One more thing," she said. "Owen isn't bad. He's just incomplete. Gideon broke him a long time ago. Don't hate him. Just pity him. It's what I do." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the trees. I stood alone near the water. I held the flash drive in my hand. I had Maya's financial data. I had Lenora's legal intent. I had everything I needed. I checked my watch. It was 1:15 p.m. Gideon was probably sitting in his office right now, sipping scotch, thinking he had won. He thought he had cornered me with his gossip blogs and his fake peace offerings. He didn't know his own wife had just handed me the execution warrant. I walked back to my car. The sadness was gone. The anger was gone. There was only the cold, mechanical precision of the endgame. I called Maya. "Change of plans," I said. "We are still filing the disclosure at 3 p.m. But I want you to add an addendum to the package." "What kind of addendum?" "Whistleblower evidence," I said. "Internal communications confirming intentional fraud. We aren't just going for a hostile takeover anymore." "Maya, what are we going for?" "We're going for a decapitation," I said. "Prep the legal team. Monday isn't going to be a negotiation. It's going to be a coroner's inquest. The transition from victim to conqueror is not a matter of emotion. It is a matter of paperwork. By Wednesday morning, I had ceased to be the woman Gideon Blackwell insulted at dinner. I had even ceased to be the potential business partner he was trying to bully. I had become something much more dangerous. I was the market force that was quietly, methodically, and legally consuming his perimeter. I sat in the war room of Aegis Ledger. The glass walls were covered with digital schematics of the Blackwell Dominion debt structure. It looked like a dying organism, a complex network of arteries all clogged with bad loans and toxic assets. Status of the trenches? I asked, not looking up from my tablet. Maya stood by the main monitor. She looked exhausted but electric. This was the kind of corporate warfare she lived for. We cleared the first hurdle, Maya said. Through our intermediary, Shadow Creek Holdings, we acquired 40% of the junior debt from Greywatch Capital. The wire transfer cleared 10 minutes ago. We are now the largest individual creditor in the unsecured category. Good, I said. And the senior lenders? The banks? They're cautious, Maya admitted. They saw the volatility in the stock price yesterday after the rumors started circulating. They are nervous about Gideon's leadership, but they are terrified of a default. They're holding on to the debt because they don't want to realize the loss on their balance sheets. They will sell, I said. They just need a little push. They need to know there's a safe harbor waiting for them if they abandon ship. I didn't want to destroy Blackwell Dominion. That was the difference between me and Gideon. He was willing to burn the village to save his castle. I wanted to save the village and evict the king. I had spent the night structuring a rescue plan. It was a beautiful piece of corporate engineering. It wasn't a merger. Mergers implied equality. This was an asset acquisition, free and clear of the previous administration's liabilities. Show me the leadership structure, I directed. Maya swiped her hand through the air, and a new document appeared on the main screen. It was titled Times Project Rebirth, Human Capital Retention and Compliance Overhaul **. This is the heart of the offer, Maya explained, pointing to the bullet points. We are guaranteeing payroll for all 3,000 employees for 24 months, secured by an escrow account. We are implementing a new whistleblower protection program that reports directly to an independent auditor, bypassing the CEO, and we are creating a retention bonus pool for mid-level managers, the people Lenora said are actually running the company. I looked at the plan. It was expensive. It would cost me $20 million just in retention bonuses, but it was necessary. Lenora was right, I said softly. The company isn't the building or the logo. It's the people. If we lose the engineers and the compliance officers, we just bought an empty shell. This plan tells them that the new administration isn't here to strip the copper out of the walls. We are here to reinforce the foundation. It makes Gideon look terrible by comparison, Maya noted. He's looting the pension fund while you are reinforcing it. That's the point, I said. When we present this to the board, they won't just see a financial offer. They will see a moral choice. They can stick with the man who is robbing them, or they can go with the woman who is catching them. I stood up. Draft the formal offer letter. Acquisition of 100% of voting shares, immediate removal of the current executive team, and strict ethical conditions attached to the payout. No golden parachute for Gideon. If he wants to cash out, he has to sign a confession of mismanagement. He'll never sign that. He will sign it when he realizes the alternative is an SEC investigation. At noon, I left the office to meet the money. I could have funded the acquisition entirely from my own reserves and Aegis's war chest, but that would have tied up too much of our operating capital. I needed partners, but I didn't want partners who wanted to run the company. I wanted silent money. I met the consortium at a private club on the Upper East Side. It was a room full of heavy leather chairs and men who spoke in whispers. They were institutional investors, pension funds, university endowments, family offices. They were people who trusted my discipline because I had made them rich before. I didn't tell them about the dinner. I didn't tell them about the trash comment or the gossip blogs. To them, feelings were irrelevant variables. I presented the numbers. Blackwell Dominion is a distressed asset, I told them, standing at the head of a mahogany table. But it is distressed because of leadership, not fundamentals. The core compliance infrastructure for legacy banks is solid. In fact, it's essential. The market creates a moat around them. But the current CEO is using the company as a personal piggy bank. I slid the projections across the table. I am proposing a hostile debt takeover followed by an equity conversion, I explained. We remove the toxic management. We integrate Aegis's AI risk software into their legacy systems. We reduce overhead by 40%. Not by firing people, but by eliminating fraud and executive bloat. We turn a failing dinosaur into a modern fortress. One of the investors, a man who ran a major endowment, looked at the papers. This is aggressive, Alexandra, he said. Gideon Blackwell is a fixture in this town. Taking him down is going to be loud. The noise is already there, I said. The stock is wobbling. The rumors are out. The question isn't if he falls, but who picks up the pieces. If we wait, the company goes into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And the lawyers eat the value. If we strike now, we buy at 30 cents on the dollar. He looked at me. He saw the cold determination in my eyes. He knew I didn't bet on losing horses. And the regulatory risk? He asked. Mitigated, I said. I have already prepared a voluntary disclosure package for the SEC. We are blowing the whistle on the previous management's irregularities. We are positioning ourselves as the cleaners, not the perpetrators. He nodded and picked up his pen. I'm in for $50 million, he said. I'll match that, said another voice. By the time I left the club, I had secured $300 million in backing. I had the war chest. Now, I just needed to breach the gates. The turning point came at 3 p.m. that afternoon. I was back in my office when my private line rang. It was not a number I recognized. This is Alexandra Walker. Miss Walker? This is David Thorne. I am the lead arranger for the banking syndicate, holding the senior debt on Blackwell Dominion. I leaned back in my chair. The sharks were circling. Hello, David, I said. I assume you've seen the market activity today. We've seen significant movement, Thorne said carefully. Bankers hated admitting panic. We understand that an entity associated with you has acquired Greywatch's position. You are now a majority creditor. I am, I said. And as a majority creditor, I am very concerned about the solvency of the debtor. I have reason to believe that the collateral backing your loans has been significantly devalued by executive mismanagement. There was a pause on the line. Thorne knew exactly what I was saying. He had probably seen the internal reports. He knew Gideon had been lying to them. Miss Walker, Thorne said, his voice dropping a register. Our priority is the stability of the facility. We cannot allow a default event. It would trigger cross-defaults across other sectors. If Gideon Blackwell cannot meet his obligations next week, and he can't, I interrupted. He doesn't have the cash, David. You know it. And I know it. He is going to default. And when he does, your bank will be left holding a portfolio of toxic assets and a PR nightmare. What are you proposing? Thorne asked. I am proposing a seamless transition, I said. I am preparing a formal offer to acquire the entire company. I will service your debt. I will make the interest payments Gideon is about to miss. I will guarantee the credit line with Aegis Ledger's own balance sheet. But there is a condition, which is, you stop taking Gideon's calls, I said. You freeze his access to the revolving credit line immediately. You tell him that due to material adverse changes in the company's outlook, the bank is exercising its right to restrict capital. Thorne hesitated. It was a brutal move. It would cut off Gideon's oxygen instantly. If I do that, Thorne said, he will sue us. Let him sue, I said. He'll be suing you with money he doesn't have. But if you don't do this, David, I will trigger a default from my position as a junior creditor. I will force the company into Chapter 11. And your bank will spend the next 5 years fighting for scraps in court. Do you want a lawsuit? Or do you want a bankruptcy? It wasn't really a choice. It was an ultimatum wrapped in a solution. We value stability above all else. Thorne said finally. I will speak to the credit committee. Expect a freeze on the accounts within the hour. Thank you, David. A pleasure doing business. I hung up. It was done. Gideon was dead in the water. He just didn't know it yet. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was starting to set over the city, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. My assistant buzzed the intercom. Alexandra, Owen Blackwell is here. He says it's urgent. I stiffened. I had been waiting for this. Send him in, I said. Owen looked terrible. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn yesterday, wrinkled and stained. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who had been awake for 48 hours, watching his world collapse on live television. He walked into my office and stopped in the center of the room. He looked at the glass walls, at the busy employees, at the empire I had built. For the first time, he seemed to truly see it. He saw the contrast between my world of competence and his world of decay. I saw the bank alert, Owen said. His voice was raspy. Dad's credit line was frozen an hour ago. He's running around the house, screaming at lawyers. He says it's a technical glitch, but it's not a technical glitch. No, I said. It's not a technical glitch. It's me. You bought the debt, Owen said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of awe. You cut him off. I secured the asset. I corrected. I am protecting the company from a man who is treating it like a casino. Owen collapsed into one of the guest chairs, putting his head in his hands. I went to the office today, he whispered. I snuck into the archives. I wanted to prove you wrong. I wanted to find proof that Dad was just stressed. That he wasn't a criminal. He looked up at me. There were tears in his eyes. Real tears this time. I found the transfers, Owen said, to the shell companies. Millions of dollars, Alex. While he was telling me we had to cut costs. While he was firing people I grew up with. He was stealing. He was stealing from his own legacy. I know, I said gently. How did you know? Owen asked. How did you see it when I lived there my whole life and didn't see a thing? Because you were looking at him as a father, I said. I was looking at him as a CEO. And as a CEO, he is a failure. Owen stood up, wiping his face. He seemed to be trying to summon something, some piece of dignity from the wreckage. I can help you, he said. I can go public. I have a big social media following. I can post a statement. I can say I stand with you. I can say I love you and that my father is wrong. I can denounce the gossip blogs. It will help turn the PR tide. He looked at me with hope. He thought this was the solution. He thought he could fix a multi-hundred-million-dollar corporate war with an Instagram post. I don't want your post, Owen, I said. He blinked. What? But I want to defend you. I want to show the world I love you. I don't need you to post love, I said. I walked around my desk and stood in front of him. I was close enough to smell the cheap whiskey on his breath. The same whiskey your father drinks. I need you to prove loyalty. That is what I am doing. No, I said. Posting a photo is easy. It costs you nothing. If you want to help me, if you want to be part of the future I am building, you have to do the hard thing. What is the hard thing? You have to cut the cord, I said. Gideon is going to call you tonight. He is going to threaten you. He is going to tell you that if you don't side with him, he will cut you out of the will. He will say you are betraying the family name. Owen flinched. He knew I was right. I want you to resign, I said. Officially. From the Blackwell Dominion Board. I want you to sign a proxy designating your voting rights to Aegis Ledger, and I want you to walk away from him not just for a week, but forever. Alex, Owen whispered. He's my father. If I do that, he will destroy me. I will have nothing left. You will have your integrity, I said. And you will have me. But you cannot have me and his money. You have to choose, Owen. Are you the heir to a fraud, or are you your own man? I took a step back. I needed him to feel the space between us. If you walk out of here and go back to that house, I said, don't come back. I am buying the company with or without you, but I can only build a life with a man who stands on his own 2 feet. Owen stared at me. He looked terrified. It was the same look he had at the dinner table, but this time, there was no table to hide behind. He'll hate me, Owen whispered. He already despises you, Owen, I said brutally. He treats you like a pet. I am offering you the chance to be a person. Owen stood there for a long minute. The silence stretched thin and taut as wire. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Do you have a proxy form? He asked. His voice shook, but the words were clear. Maya has one ready, I said. Get it, Owen said. I'm done being the heir. He looked out the window at the city lights. I think I just want to be Owen. I pressed the intercom button. Maya, I said, bring in the proxy papers. And bring a resignation letter. We have a signature to collect. I looked at Owen. He was pale, trembling, and terrified. But he was standing up. It was a start. The timeline for a corporate execution is rarely measured in years. It is measured in hours. By Thursday morning, the atmosphere inside the Blackwell Dominion headquarters was not just tense. It was radioactive. My source inside the building, Lenora Blackwell, was texting me real-time updates. Gideon had called an emergency board meeting for 10 a.m. The agenda had a single item, Defense Against Hostile Actions by Aegis Ledger *. I sat in my command center, watching the stock ticker on one screen and the live financial news feed on another. He's screaming. Lenora texted. He's telling the directors you are emotionally unstable. He's calling you a vindictive ex-girlfriend, trying to destroy the company because Owen wouldn't commit. He's playing the victim card hard. I showed the message to Maya. She was standing by the window, pacing. It's a smart move, Maya admitted. If he can frame this as a personal vendetta, he can argue that your offer is not in the best interest of the shareholders. He can claim you are acting in bad faith. He might even get an injunction to block the debt conversion. He can scream all he wants, I said, checking the time. It was 9:55 a.m. But in 5 minutes, the narrative changes. The disclosure package, I confirmed. We filed the documents with the SEC exactly 30 minutes ago. By regulation, the filing had to be made public immediately. The algorithmic trading bots would be the first to catch it. Scanning for keywords, fraud, misappropriation, undisclosed liabilities, Then the human analysts would see the addendum. The internal emails provided by Lenora, proving Gideon had consciously ordered the suppression of risk reports. I watched the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12. On the screen, the Blackwell Dominion stock ticker froze for a microsecond, then flashed red. It dropped 4% in a single trade, then 7%, then 12%. There it is, I said softly. The news anchor on the muted television suddenly touched her earpiece. The banner at the bottom of the screen changed from Times Market Rally Continues Times to Times Breaking News, accounting irregularities at Blackwell Dominion *. I could only imagine the scene inside Gideon's boardroom. He would be in the middle of a rant about my hysterical nature when every phone in the room would start vibrating. The directors would look at their screens. They would see the SEC filing. They would see the emails. They would realize the vindictive ex-girlfriend was actually the only person who had told them the truth. Stock is down 18%. Maya read from her tablet. Trading has been halted by the exchange due to volatility. Good, I said. Now Gideon can't sell. He can't move assets. He is locked in a burning building. Gideon is issuing a statement, Maya said, refreshing her feed. He's doubling down. He's blaming you for the crash. Quote, "This is a coordinated attack by a hostile actor using stolen and out-of-context data to manipulate the stock price. We will be suing Alexandra Walker for corporate espionage. Let him talk, I said. The ones inside know the truth. The directors aren't stupid. They know out of context is code for caught red-handed. They aren't worried about my espionage. They are worried about their own directors' and officers' liability insurance. But just as I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, the phone on my desk rang. It was the red line, the secure, direct link I had established with the banking syndicate. I answered. Walker here. Alexandra. We have a problem. It was David Thorne. His voice was tight, stripped of the professional calm he had displayed yesterday. What kind of problem, David? The stock drop was expected. You knew the disclosure was coming. It's not the stock, Thorne said. It's the debt. We just received a counteroffer for the senior credit line. I stiffened. From who? Gideon is insolvent. He can't buy back his own debt. Not from Gideon, Thorne said. From Greywatch Capital. My blood ran cold. Greywatch. I had bought their junior debt days ago. I thought they were out of the building. I thought they were happy to take their cash and run. But I had underestimated their greed. They had looked at the situation, seen the chaos I was creating, and realized there was an opportunity to outflank me. Explain, I commanded. Greywatch just offered to buy our syndicate's entire debt position, Thorne said quickly. They are offering 100 cents on the dollar. All cash. Immediate settlement. They want to step into the bank's shoes as the primary secured creditor. I understood the play instantly. It was brutal. If Greywatch bought the senior debt, they would sit above me in the capital structure. They could seize the company immediately. They wouldn't care about saving it. They wouldn't care about the employees or the compliance software. They would liquidate Blackwell Dominion. They would sell the real estate, sell the patent portfolio, fire all 3,000 workers, and walk away with $1 billion profit. And because they would be the senior creditor, my junior position and my equity plan would be wiped out. I would lose everything I had invested. David, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. You cannot sell to them. Greywatch is a vulture fund. They are going to strip the company. You know that. I know that, Thorne said defensively. But I have a fiduciary duty to my bank. They are offering full value. You are offering a restructuring plan that keeps the debt on the books for another year. Their money is faster, Alexandra. Their money is dirty money, I snapped. Money is money, Thorne replied. I have a credit committee meeting in 1 hour to review their proposal. Unless you can match their offer and provide a compelling reason to reject immediate cash, I have to sell to them. He hung up. I slammed the phone down. Maya! I yelled. Maya rushed in from the outer office. What happened? Greywatch is trying to outflank us, I said, grabbing my suit jacket. They are trying to buy the senior debt out from under us. If they get that paper, they control the foreclosure. They will strip the company for parts. We can't match an all-cash buyout, Maya said, her face pale. We don't have that kind of liquidity on hand. We need 3 days to clear the funds from the consortium. We don't need to match their money, I said, my mind racing. We need to make their money look toxic. Get the car, I said. We're going to Park Avenue. And get the head of the Blackwell Employees Association on the phone in 10 minutes. The union? Maya asked, confused. Blackwell Dominion isn't unionized. There is an employee association, I said. Get the head of it. I need a statement. I need noise. The drive up to the bank headquarters on Park Avenue was a blur of phone calls. I was no longer fighting a financial battle. I was fighting a political one. I walked into David Thorne's conference room 40 minutes later. I didn't wait to be announced. The credit committee was already there, 6 men and women in gray suits, staring at a term sheet Greywatch had sent over. They looked up, startled. Miss Walker, Thorne said, standing up. We are in a private meeting. I am here to save you from a PR disaster that will make the Blackwell fraud look like a picnic, I said, throwing my bag onto the table. I stood at the head of the room, looking at each of them. Graywatch Capital is offering you cash, I said. But what they aren't telling you is their post-acquisition plan. They intend to liquidate. They are going to fire 3,000 people in the state of New York, 3,000 voters, 3,000 taxpayers. That is not our concern, one of the bankers said dismissively. We are lenders, not social workers. It becomes your concern when I release the statement I just drafted, I said. I slid a piece of paper across the table. I am prepared to make a counteroffer, I said. I will match Graywatch's price, but I won't pay today. I will pay in 48 hours. However, my offer comes with a legally binding covenant to preserve 90% of the workforce and fully fund the pension plan. Why would we accept a delayed payment just to save jobs? The banker asked. Why? I said, leaning in. Because if you sell to Graywatch, I will release the details of this meeting publicly. I will tell the press that you had 2 offers on the table. One from a tech founder who wanted to save 3,000 American jobs, and one from a vulture fund that wanted to destroy them. And I will tell them you chose the vultures to save 24 hours of interest. I paused. I will name you, I said to the man who had spoken. I will name the bank. I will make sure that every time you try to open a branch in this state, the local government remembers that you sold out your constituents for a quick profit. The room went silent. Banks hate risk, but they hate bad press even more. In the current political climate, being seen as an engine of mass layoffs was suicide. Graywatch won't agree to the employment covenants, I added. They can't. It destroys their business model. Ask them. Call them right now. Ask them to match my clause on job retention. If they say yes, sell to them. If they say no, you know exactly what they are. Thorne looked at the paper. He looked at his colleagues. He saw the trap I had set. It was the same trap I had used on Gideon, just larger. Call Graywatch, Thorne said to his assistant. 5 minutes later, the answer came back. Graywatch refused the employment clause. They claimed it was commercially unreasonable. Thorne looked at me. He looked tired. 48 hours, Alexandra, he said. If the funds aren't in our account by close of business Friday, we sell to Graywatch. And God help you. Done, I said. I walked out of the bank. I was shaking. It was the biggest bluff of my life. I had the money committed, but moving that much capital in 2 days was a logistical nightmare. My phone vibrated. It was Owen. He called me, Owen said. His voice sounded small, like a child hiding in a closet. Gideon. Yes. He knows about the proxy. He knows I am talking to you. He went crazy, Alex. He said, if I side with you, if I give you my vote, I am out of the will. He said he will burn the trust fund to the ground. He said I will never see a dime of the family money. I stopped on the sidewalk. The wind whipped my hair across my face. What did you say to him? I asked. I didn't say anything yet, Owen said. I hung up. I'm scared, Alex. That trust fund is my whole life. It's how I pay for everything. It's not your life, I said fiercely. It's your leash. As long as he holds that money over you, you are his dog. Do you want to be a dog, Owen, or do you want to be a man? I don't know if I can do this, he whispered. You have to do it now, I said. The board meeting is still going on. Gideon is trying to whip votes. If he finds out I blocked Graywatch, he will try something else. We need to cut his legs out from under him before he can run. Resign, I said. Right now, before the vote, send the letter to the corporate secretary. Tell them you are stepping down from the board effective immediately, and you are assigning your proxy voting rights to Aegis Ledger. If I do that, it's over, Owen said. He will never speak to me again. Good, I said, because the things he says to you are poison. I waited. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the terrifying sound of a man standing on a ledge, trying to decide whether to jump or turn back to the fire. Do it, Owen, I said, softer this time. Trust me. You don't need his money. You have talent. You have a degree. You can build something, but you can't build anything on a foundation of rot. Okay, Owen said. The word was a breath. Okay, I'll do it. I'll send it. Send it, I said. And then turn off your phone. 10 minutes later, Maya texted me a screenshot from the internal company portal. Asterisk corporate announcement. Owen Blackwell resigns from board of directors. Cites need for new leadership direction. Assigns all proxy voting rights to Alexandra Walker. Aegis Ledger. Asterisk. I stared at the screen. He had done it. He had actually done it. He had cut the umbilical cord. Gideon had lost his favorite hostage. Back at the office, the atmosphere was frantic. The market was closing in 20 minutes. The stock had dropped 30%. The deal with the bank was hanging by a thread. The board was in chaos, but the real battle was just beginning. I looked at the whiteboard where we had mapped out the endgame. We had the debt. We had the proxy votes. We had the moral high ground. But Gideon still occupied the chair. He was still in the building, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. He isn't going to go quietly, Maya said, standing beside me. He's going to try to burn the place down on his way out. Let him try, I said. We have 24 hours until the final shareholder vote. He will spend that time trying to spin a narrative that makes him a martyr. I picked up a marker and wrote one word on the board in red ink. Asterisk. Legacy. Asterisk. The final fight isn't about money anymore, I told Maya. We won the money fight at the bank. The final fight is about the narrative. He wants to leave as the tragic king betrayed by his subjects. We need to make sure the world sees him as the madman who almost burned the kingdom. How do we do that? Maya asked. We don't say a word. I said. We let him speak. We let him scream. And we make sure every microphone in New York is there to record it. I turned to her. Set up the cameras for tomorrow morning, I said. We are going to televise the execution. The air in the boardroom of Blackwell Dominion was recycled, cooled to a steady 68 degrees, and smelled faintly of stale coffee and expensive cologne. It was 2 p.m. on Friday. Outside, the world was moving on. Markets were digesting the news of the stock plunge. Analysts were writing their postmortems, and employees were refreshing their inboxes, waiting to see if they still had jobs. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy enough to crush bone. The long mahogany table was occupied by 12 people. At one end sat Gideon Blackwell. He looked diminished, though he fought to hide it. His tie was perfectly knotted, but his eyes darted around the room, assessing loyalty and counting votes, looking for a weakness he could exploit. At the other end, I didn't have a team of lawyers whispering in my ear. I didn't have a stack of binders. I had a single sheet of paper in front of me. It was the term sheet for the acquisition. It was the only exit from the burning building, and everyone in the room knew it. The chairman of the board, a man named Sterling who had been a U.S. senator in the 90s, cleared his throat. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. We are here to vote on the acquisition proposal submitted by Aegis Ledger, Sterling said. His voice was tight. As we all know, the company is facing a liquidity crisis. The banks have frozen our credit lines. Trading has been halted. We are effectively insolvent. He looked at Gideon. However, Sterling continued, Mr. Blackwell has proposed an alternative structure, a compromise. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms. I wanted to hear this. Gideon stood up. He smoothed his jacket, putting on the mask of the benevolent patriarch, the role he had played for 40 years. Thank you, Sterling, Gideon said. His voice was rich, projected from the diaphragm. It is true we are in a difficult moment, but panic is not a strategy. Miss Walker's offer is aggressive. It is predatory. She wants to strip this company of its identity. He looked at the board members, making eye contact with each of them. I am willing to step aside as CEO, Gideon announced. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Temporarily, Gideon added quickly, I will remain in the role of executive chairman. I will retain a 5-year consulting contract to ensure leadership continuity. I will receive a severance package commensurate with my tenure $30 million. and I will guide the new management team to ensure they respect the Blackwell legacy. In exchange, I will use my personal relationships to unfreeze the credit lines and stabilize the stock. It was breathtaking. Even at the edge of the abyss, his arrogance was intact. He wanted me to pay him $30 million to stop ruining his own company. He wanted me to buy the house, but let him keep the keys. The board members looked at each other. I saw the hesitation. They were old friends of his. They played golf with him. If they could find a way to save him, and save themselves, they would take it. Sterling looked at me. Miss Walker, is this modification acceptable to you? A consulting role for Mr. Blackwell could ease the transition with legacy clients. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. No, I said. The word hung in the air. Miss Walker. Gideon smiled, a condescending twist of his lips. Business is about compromise, Alexandra. You can't expect to walk in here and decapitate the leadership without consequences. I am not negotiating a peace treaty, Gideon, I said. I am negotiating a rescue operation. You are asking for $30 million and a position of influence. You are the reason the credit lines are frozen. You are the reason the stock is halted. You are not the asset. You are the liability. I looked at Sterling. My offer stands unaltered, I said. Acquisition of 100%. Immediate resignation of Gideon Blackwell. No consulting contract. No golden parachute. He leaves with whatever is in his pockets. And nothing else. If you vote for his proposal, I pull my funding immediately. I trigger the default on the junior debt. And on Monday morning, this company files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. You are being irrational, Gideon yelled, losing his composure. This is my company. My grandfather built this, and you broke it. She is vindictive, Gideon shouted, turning to the board. Can't you see this is personal? She is mad because I wouldn't let her marry my son. She is doing this out of spite. You cannot hand the company over to an emotionally unstable woman. The misogyny was so casual, so desperate, it almost made me laugh. But I didn't laugh. I looked at the door. It was time for the board to see the rest of the picture. The door opened. Lenora Blackwell walked in. She wasn't wearing the trench coat and sunglasses from the park. She was wearing a structured gray suit. She looked like the executive she had been 20 years ago. Before Gideon turned her into a decoration, she was holding a thick, sealed manila envelope. Gideon froze. Lenora? What are you doing here? Get out. This is a closed session. Lenora didn't look at him. She walked straight to Sterling. She placed the envelope on the table in front of him. These are for the record, Lenora said. Her voice was steady, though I could see her hands shaking slightly. Sterling opened the envelope. He pulled out a stack of emails. He began to read. His eyes widened. He passed a few pages to the director on his left. What is that? Gideon demanded. Lenora, what did you give them? The truth, Lenora said calmly. Sterling looked up. His face had lost all its color. He looked at Gideon with a mixture of horror and fear. These are emails from your personal account, Gideon, Sterling said. Dated 6 months ago. You are instructing the risk management team to suppress findings in the commercial real estate portfolio. You explicitly tell them to, quote, bury the numbers deep enough that God couldn't find them. The room went dead silent. This wasn't mismanagement. This was fraud. Gideon's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. That is taken out of context. I never sent that. This is a fabrication. He pointed a shaking finger at me, then at Lenora. They are conspiring against me! Gideon screamed. They forged the records. Then, his eyes landed on Julian Vance, the chief financial officer who was sitting quietly in the corner of the room. Julian was a quiet man who had always done exactly what Gideon told him. It was Julian, Gideon yelled. Julian runs the servers. He must have sent those emails to cover up his own incompetence. He's been hiding losses for years. I just found out about it last week. That's why the company is failing. It's his fault. It was a desperate, ugly pivot. He was trying to throw his own lieutenant to the wolves to save his skin. Julian Vance stood up slowly. He looked at Gideon. He looked at the bus that was about to run him over. "I am not going to federal prison for you, Gideon," Julian said. Julian reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. "I started recording our morning briefings 3 months ago," Julian told the board. "Because I knew this day was coming. I knew he would try to blame me." Julian looked at Sterling. "I am resigning, effective immediately," Julian said. "And I am prepared to cooperate fully with the SEC and Miss Walker's auditors." Gideon ordered the cover-up. He threatened to fire anyone who didn't comply. He called it creative accounting. I call it a felony. The energy in the room shifted instantly. 5 minutes ago, the board members had looked at Gideon with sympathy. They saw an old friend having a bad quarter. Now, they looked at him with terror. They weren't thinking about his legacy. They were thinking about their own legal liability. They were thinking about the DOJ regulators who would be swarming this building on Monday if they voted to keep Gideon. If they voted to pay him $30 million after seeing this evidence, they would be accessories. They would be sued into oblivion. Gideon saw the shift. He saw the walls closing in. He collapsed into his chair. The bluster evaporated. He looked small. He looked old. "Please," he whispered. He looked at Sterling. "Please. You know me. We've known each other for 30 years. I built this place. You can't let her take it. You can't let her humiliate me like this." He turned to look at me. His eyes were wet. "It's the family name," he pleaded. "It's all I have, Alexandra. Be reasonable. You proved your point. You won. Just let me keep the title. Let me retire with dignity. Don't leave me naked in front of the world." He was playing the victim. He was trying to invoke the sanctity of the Blackwell name, the same name he had used to bludgeon people into submission. I stood up. I picked up the black folder I had brought with me. "You talk about dignity, Gideon," I said. "Let's talk about reality." I opened the folder and turned it toward the board. It was a chart. "This is my continuity plan," I told the room. "While Gideon is asking you for a $30 million golden parachute, I am proposing a $30 million retention pool for the employees." I pointed to the numbers. "If you accept my offer," I explained, "I will guarantee the salary of every employee in this building for 2 years. I will fully fund the pension plan that Gideon has been looting. I will pay for the legal defense of the managers who were coerced into silence." I looked at Gideon. "He wants the money for himself," I said. "I want the money for the people who actually do the work. That is the difference between us. He thinks times he times is the company. I know the company is the 3,000 people waiting outside that door." I turned back to Sterling. "You have a choice," I said. "You can vote for Gideon, pay him his millions, and explain to the SEC why you rewarded a man who committed fraud. Or you can vote for me. Save the employees. Save the creditors. And save your own reputations." Sterling wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked at the other directors. They were pale. They were nodding. They wanted an out. They wanted safety. "We need to vote," Sterling said. "Wait," Gideon said. "Wait. You can't do this today. We need to verify the recordings. We need to verify the emails. You can't make a decision of this magnitude based on hearsay." "It's not hearsay, Gideon," Julian said from the corner. "It's evidence." "I motioned to table the vote until tomorrow morning," one of the directors said suddenly. "We need legal counsel to review the liability exposure before we sign final termination documents for a CEO. We need to do this by the book." I frowned. A delay was dangerous. Speed was my ally. Time gave Gideon room to maneuver. "The market is closed for the weekend," Sterling said, grasping at the lifeline. "A 12-hour delay won't change the stock price. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp for the final vote. In the meantime, the legal team will review Mr. Vance's recordings." I stared at Sterling. I knew what he was doing. He was a coward. He knew he had to fire Gideon, but he couldn't do it while his old friend was sitting there crying over his legacy. He wanted a night to let the lawyers draft the paperwork so he could hide behind the process. Fine, I said. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. But understand this. My offer expires at 9:01 a.m. If the vote doesn't pass by then, I walk away, and the default notice is served. Understood, Sterling said. Meeting adjourned. I packed up my briefcase. I didn't look at Gideon. As I walked out of the room, I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. I stopped at the door and looked back. Gideon was still sitting at the table. He wasn't crying anymore. He wasn't pleading. He was staring at me. His eyes were dry, hard, and filled with a cold, terrifying clarity. It was the look of a man who realized he had nothing left to lose. It was a narcissist who was being deprived of his reflection. It was a king being dragged to the guillotine. And kings do not die quietly. I walked out into the hallway where Maya was waiting. They delayed? Maya asked, seeing my face. Until tomorrow morning, I said. They are scared. They want the lawyers to hold their hands. That is bad. That is dangerous, Maya said. We just backed a tiger into a corner and then turned off the lights. He's finished, Alexandra, Maya said. Julian flipped. Lenora flipped. The board is terrified. He doesn't have any plays left. He has tonight, I said. I had a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. Gideon Blackwell was a man who believed the world belonged to him by divine right. He wouldn't accept defeat because of emails and spreadsheets. He would view this as a theft. He would view me as the thief. And if he couldn't keep the crown, he would make sure there was no kingdom left for me to rule. Increase security at the data center, I told Maya as we walked to the elevator. And put a guard on the document storage facility. You think he would try to destroy evidence? I think, I said, hitting the button for the lobby, that he would burn the whole world down just to watch me choke on the smoke. I walked out of the building and into the late afternoon sun. The city was busy, noisy, and alive. But to me, the world had gone quiet. It was the silence of a countdown. I checked my phone. No messages from Owen. No messages from the bank. Just the clock ticking. Tomorrow morning, the war would end. But first, we had to survive the night. Saturday morning didn't feel like a weekend. It felt like the first breath of air after being underwater for a week. I walked into the lobby of the Blackwell Dominion headquarters at 8:45 a.m. The security guard, a man named Thomas who had worked there for 15 years, stood up when he saw me. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't ask if I had an appointment. He simply hit the button to unlock the turnstile and gave me a short, respectful nod. He knew. The whole building knew. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a visitor. I was the majority stakeholder. I took the elevator up to the executive floor. The silence was absolute. Usually, Saturday mornings were for skeleton crews. But today, the entire floor was occupied. Assistants were at their desks. Junior analysts were clustered in the break room. They were waiting for the white smoke or the black smoke. They were waiting to see if they still had a future. I walked straight to the boardroom. The double doors were open. The room was exactly as we had left it yesterday, but the energy had shifted. Yesterday there had been panic. Today there was resignation. The board members were seated. They looked tired. They had spent the night talking to their personal attorneys, and the legal counsel had been unanimous. Drop Gideon, or go down with the ship. Gideon Blackwell sat at the head of the table. He wore the same suit he had worn yesterday. His eyes were red. He clearly hadn't slept. He looked like a statue that had begun to crack from the inside. Owen was there too. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city. He wasn't looking at his father. He looked at me as I walked in. And for the first time in our relationship, I saw a man who was standing on his own 2 feet. I walked to the other end of the table. I didn't sit down. Good morning, I said. My voice was calm, echoing slightly in the large room. It is 9 a.m. Sterling, the chairman, cleared his throat. He looked at the clock on the wall, as if praying it would reverse time. The meeting is called to order, Sterling said. The agenda is the final vote on the acquisition proposal by Aegis Ledger. Read the terms, I said. Maya, standing beside me, placed a document on the table. She read aloud, her voice crisp and professional. 1. Aegis Ledger acquires 100% of outstanding shares of Blackwell Dominion. 2. Aegis Ledger provides an immediate liquidity injection of $80 million to stabilize debt covenants and clear payroll. 3. A comprehensive compliance overhaul will be initiated immediately, overseen by an independent auditor. 4. The immediate termination of Gideon Blackwell as CEO and chairman of the board times for cause asterisk, citing gross mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. The words hung in the air like smoke. Asterisk. 4. Cause. Asterisk. That was the legal dagger. It meant no severance. It meant no honor. Gideon slammed his hand on the table. It was a weak sound, lacking the thunder he used to command. "This is theft," Gideon hissed. "You are stealing my company. You are stealing my life." "I am saving the company times from times your life," I corrected. "The terms are non-negotiable." "Gideon, you have seen the bank statements. You have seen the debt recall notices. If you don't sign this agreement by 9:15 a.m., I walk. The banks foreclose at noon. The company ceases to exist on Monday." Gideon looked around the room. He looked at Sterling. He looked at the other directors. They all looked down at their papers. They couldn't meet his eyes. They had already made their choice. They chose survival. Desperation seized him. He turned his head and looked at the window. "Owen," Gideon said, his voice cracking. "Owen, look at me." Owen turned slowly. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. "Are you letting her do this?" Gideon asked. "Are you letting this outsider destroy your inheritance? I built this for you. Everything I did, the creative accounting, the risks I took I did to preserve the empire for you, so you could be a king." He stood up, shaking. "If you let her do this, you are out of the family," Gideon threatened. "I will strike your name from history. You will be nothing. You will be in exile. Do you hear me? You are ungrateful, weak, and pathetic." The insults that used to make Owen crumble now seemed to bounce off him. He had heard them too many times. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, tired sadness. Owen walked to the table. He stood opposite his father. "I am not ungrateful," Owen said softly. "Then stop her," Gideon yelled. "Vote against her. Use your proxy." "I can't use my proxy," Owen said. "I gave it to Alexandra." Gideon gasped as if he had been physically struck. "But I want you to know something," Owen continued. "You were right about one thing. You taught me loyalty. You drilled it into me since I was 6 years old. Loyalty to the name. Loyalty to the image. Loyalty to the table." Owen looked at me, then back to his father. "You taught me loyalty," Owen repeated. "I'm just not giving it to you anymore. I'm giving it to the people who actually tell the truth." Gideon stared at his son. The silence stretched, painful and absolute. The last pillar of his world had just collapsed. Sterling pushed the signature page across the mahogany table toward Gideon. "It's time, Gideon," Sterling said softly. "Please, sign it for the employees. If you force a bankruptcy, the pension fund gets wiped out. Don't let that be your legacy." Gideon looked at the pen. He looked at the document, stripping him of his power. He looked at the faces of the men he had led for decades. Seeing only pity, he finally realized there was no way out. The walls had closed in. He picked up the pen. His hand shook violently. He signed his name. The signature was jagged, broken. Nothing like the flourishing autograph he used to sign on annual reports. He threw the pen away. "Done." Gideon spat. "Take it. Take the ashes." Sterling looked at me. "The motion passes. The acquisition is authorized." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. The legal transfer was complete. I owned the building. I owned the debt. I owned the future, but there was one final piece of business. Maya, I said. The addendum. Maya slid one last sheet of paper across the table to Gideon. He frowned. What is this? I signed your damn surrender. This is the condition of your exit, I said. Gideon read it. His face turned a dangerous shade of red. No parachute, he whispered. No consulting role. No office access. Correct, I said. You were fired for cause, Gideon. You leave with your personal belongings. You do not get a $30 million payout for failing. You get nothing. I'll sue you, he yelled. I'll spend the rest of my life in court. You can try, I said calmly. But if you sue, I will release the full, uncut audio recordings of you ordering the fraud. I will hand them over to the DOJ. Right now, I am letting you walk away with your freedom. If you fight me, you will trade your Greenwich mansion for a prison cell. Do you want to take that risk? Gideon froze. He looked at the paper. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew I had Julian Vance's recordings. He collapsed back into the chair. The fight went out of him. He wasn't a king anymore. He was just an old man who had lost everything because he refused to adapt. Fine, he whispered. Good, I said. I stood up. The meeting is adjourned. Gideon, you have 10 minutes to collect your personal items from your office. Jonas is waiting outside to escort you. Gideon stood up slowly. He straightened his tie, trying to summon one last shred of dignity. He looked at the board members, waiting for a handshake, a goodbye, a moment of respect. No one moved. No one stood up. They looked down at their papers. Gideon turned and walked toward the double doors of the main lobby entrance. Gideon, I called out. He stopped, his hand on the brass doorknob. He turned to look at me, a sneer forming on his lips. I'm leaving, Alexandra. You have your company. Enjoy the wreckage. Not through that door, I said. I pointed to the far corner of the room, to a plain beige door that led to the service hallway and the freight elevators. The main lobby is for employees and guests, I said, my voice perfectly level. You are neither. Gideon's eyes widened. He remembered. He remembered the dinner. He remembered calling me trash. He remembered telling me that the staff took out the trash. You can't be serious, he stammered. That's the service exit. It's for the catering staff. It's the fastest route to the street, I said. And it avoids the press waiting in the lobby. I'm doing you a favor. It wasn't a favor. It was a mirror. Gideon looked at the main doors, then at the service door. He looked at Owen, who was watching him with a blank expression. He realized he had no power to refuse. If he argued, Jonas would drag him out. He lowered his head, walked past the mahogany table, past the oil portraits of his ancestors, and walked to the beige door. He pushed it open. It led to a concrete hallway lined with recycling bins. He stepped through. The door clicked shut behind him. Gideon Blackwell was gone. The room let out a collective breath. The tension broke. I turned to the board. Thank you, gentlemen. You made the right choice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 3,000 people to reassure. I walked out of the boardroom and onto the trading floor. I stood on the balcony overlooking the main atrium. Maya handed me a microphone. The PA system chimed. Hundreds of faces looked up. They were terrified. They had heard the bankruptcy rumors. They expected to be told to pack their boxes. Good morning, I said. My name is Alexandra Walker. 10 minutes ago, Aegis Ledger acquired Blackwell Dominion. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I know you are worried, I continued. I know you have heard rumors about layoffs and liquidation. I am here to tell you those rumors are false. I paused. I wanted them to hear this. There will be no layoffs, I said clearly. The company is fully funded. Your payroll is secure. Your pension funds have been fully collateralized as of this morning. A gasp, followed by some hesitant applause. We are not here to strip this company, I said. We are here to rebuild it. The toxicity ends today. The fraud ends today. From this moment on, we operate with total transparency. We value competence, not Lineage. We value the truth, not silence. I looked down at them. You are the company, I said. Not the name on the building. You, and as long as you are willing to work to build something real, you will have a home here. The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar. It wasn't the polite clapping of a gala. It was the applause of relief. It was the sound of people getting their lives back. I looked at Owen, who was standing beside me. He was smiling. It was a real smile, tired, but genuine. You did it, he said. We did it, I corrected. That night, I hosted dinner. It wasn't in a mansion in Greenwich. It was in my apartment in Tribeca. The table wasn't mahogany. It was reclaimed wood. The plates weren't fine china. They were simple ceramic. There were no senators. There were no heirs. There was Maya, who had outmaneuvered Wall Street banks. There was Lenora, who looked 10 years younger without the weight of Gideon's secrets. There was Owen, who had rolled up his sleeves and helped cook the pasta. There was Julian Vance, who was already working on the new compliance structure. We sat around the table, passing platters of food, laughing, talking over each other. The wine was good, but no one mentioned the vintage or the price. I looked around the room. I looked at these people who had fought beside me in the trenches. Gideon Blackwell believed that status was something you inherited. He believed it was a wall you built to keep people out. He was wrong. I raised my glass not for a toast, but just to take a sip. I caught Owen's eye. He winked at me. I realized then that Gideon had tried to make me feel like I didn't belong at his table. But he never understood the most basic rule of power. If you don't like the seating arrangement, you don't beg for a chair. You build your own table. And looking at the faces around me, seeing the loyalty and respect we had forged through the fire, I knew the truth. This was the only table that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with all of you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, *Olivia's Revenge Stories*. Like the video and hit the notification bell so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world.